We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Lamed Gimel, volume 33, the first sicha for the Parshas Beha'alosecha. In this sicha, the Rebbe discusses Pesach Sheni from the Parsha, in the Parsha of the Beha'alosecha, that if you didn't bring the first Korban, you bring the second Pesach. If you don't bring it on the 14th of Nisan, you bring it on the 14th of Iyar. The Rebbe brings down the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation that the process of Pesach Rishon is basically running away from evil, Sur MeRa, and then the Pesach Sheni, which is the month of Iyar, is the month of Asay Tov. So first we have to start to stay away from the negative, and then on Iyar we change around and we do the positive. And the Rebbe's question is, how does this fit with a very simple understanding of the pasuk that that you only bring the Pesach Sheni to make up for the Pesach Rishon? According to the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, it's a process. First there's a Pesach Rishon, and then there's a Pesach Sheni. But we see that it's only bringing up. You only bring a Pesach Sheni if you didn't bring the Pesach Rishon. And but the Rebbe will also explain why. The Rebbe opens up why the makeup days are a month later. Pesach Rishon is the 14th of Nisan. Pesach Sheni is the 14th of Iyar. And according to the Tzemach Tzedek, we understand that these are related. The month of Nisan is when we still run away from the evil, going out of Egypt. The month of Iyar is already the month in which we are getting closer to Asay Tov, the perfection of the Midos. So the months have to connected with each other. And that explains, as the Rebbe says, why we have to wait until Iyar until we have the Pesach Sheni. Why didn't they make it right after Yontif? The first time those who became Tomei were eligible to become Toir while it was still Pesach. They didn't really need to wait a whole month. Why did Hashem make it in a way that they have to wait to Iyar? But with the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, it fits because the month of Iyar is the month of returning and changing around to good, the perfection and the sorting out and refinement of the midos as we count the sfira, as opposed to the month of Mitzrayim is running away. But the question still remains. The Rebbe wants to know if this is an orderly way. That first we have to start with Rishon and then Sheni. What about those who don't bring the Pesach Rishon? They're the only ones that are bringing the Pesach Sheni. But if somebody brought the Pesach Rishon, he wouldn't bring the Pesach Sheni. How is he going to accomplish this order? As the Rebbe will speak the details. Let's go inside and we'll do step by step. Beha'alosecha Aleph. B'negei ledin Pesach Sheni, as it pertains to the halacha of Pesach Sheni, shehatayra kova hatashlumim the Pesach Rishon liyudalad be'iyur davke. The Torah set up the makeup for the first Pesach. If one didn't bring the first Korban Pesach, the Torah set it up Yudalad be'iyur davke, specifically on the 14th of Iyar, which is Chodesh Yomim la'achari Pesach Rishon. It's a full month after the first Pesach. So the Rebbe says Tzarich Biyur. So we need to explain this. This needs explanation. Man nishtane Korban Pesach. Why is the Korban Pesach different? That we wait a whole month for the Tashlumim. Let's compare this to the Tashlumim of the makeup for other korbanos. Over there, it's right away. We don't have to wait a whole month. Shezman hatashlumim shaloi, the makeup time for Pesach Rishon, bo la'achar hefsek shel chodesh yomim. That comes after an interruption of a full month. So how come we have to wait a full month to make up for Pesach? So why is the difference mishar korbanos Yom Tov from the other sacrifices that we bring on Yom Tov? We know the korbanos Yom Tov have 7 days that follow. If you miss the first day, you bring it on the second day or the third day, up till 7 days. Sheyimei tashlumeihem, the days of makeup for missing out on the korban, boyim behemshech liyom rishon shel chag. They come in continuation of the first day of the holidays. So if you didn't bring it on the first, you go on the second. You don't have to wait a month, but by Pesach Sheni, if you didn't do the first Pesach, you have to wait a whole month. What's the reason for waiting a whole month? As we'll see, the Rebbe will explain, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, that it's specifically designed for Iyar, because that's the month. But the Rebbe first brings out even stronger the question that these people who complained and who brought about the command of Hashem that you should make the Pesach Sheni, they were actually ready to bring the Pesach a day later, as we'll see. They didn't have to wait a whole month. So in order to facilitate and satisfy their desire to bring a Korban Pesach, it doesn't seem like it was necessary to wait to the month of a year, a whole month. Ubefrat al pi maimer chazal, especially based on the saying of our sages of blessed memory. Who are these people that came to Moshe Rabbeinu to complain, and they said, we are tmeim lenefesh odom, that we are impure, we touch the body, we can't bring the korban. So these tmeim lenefesh odom bamidbar, who were in the desert, that they came to complain to Moshe that they also want to bring a korban Pesach, but they couldn't bring it because at that night, on the day of the 14th, they were tamei. And Shabo B'taina, so they came therefore with an argument. Who are they that came with the argument? Loma negora lebilti hakriv es korban Hashem b'moyede. Why should we lose out? Why should we not be able to bring the korban Hashem in the timely way because they're not pure? They're tummy. V'zochu, and because they insisted or complained, they merited shaparshazu nemra al yideim, that this portion of Pesach Sheni was said through them. So, who were these people, and when were they eligible to be able to bring the Korban Pesach? When would they be toher? So we know that Chal Yoim Hashvi Litum Osam Be'erev Pesach, their last day, their 7th day for the Tumah, after which they would be pure, that came out exactly in Erev Pesach when you were supposed to bring the Korban Pesach, and therefore they could not bring the Korban Pesach. So, according to this, in order to facilitate and satisfy them, they could have done it the next day. If the Eibishter would have said you could bring the Korban Pesach on the 15th of Nisan, they could have already brought and they would be happy. They didn't have to wait a whole month. Shalifizeh harahoya efsher likvoya ezman hatashlumim. According to this, they could have set up, the Torah could have set up the time for makeup b'meshech yimei hachagufa, during the duration of the Yom Tov itself. We didn't have to push it off for the month of the year, a whole month. They were ready to do it during the Chag. Their 7th day was already on Erev Pesach, so the next day or 2 days later, they could already bring the Korban, they were toher already. They could have gone to the mikveh and become toher. So we didn't have to wait. So why did they push it off? The Eibishter pushed it up until Iyar. So the Rebbe says, well, that question is actually the basis of the Tzemach Tzedek's interpretation that Pesach Sheni has to be in the month of Iyar because Pesach Sheni Avoida is Asay Tov and Pnimius Inyonim in the inner matter of things, and the month of Nisan is a month of when we run away from the evil Sur MeRa, we go away, and therefore the Chachamim, the Torah, set up the date in the month of Iyar, not in the month of Nisan, the days that follow Yudalad, to give and waited to the month of Iyar because it belongs conceptually, the Avodah Pesach Sheni belongs to the month of Iyar. This is the basis of the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, because the Tzemach Tzedek is has the question, why push it off till Pesach Sheni, till the month of Iyar? That tells him that it has a connection to the month of Iyar. Yesh loymar shall be pnimius haTorah, that based on the inner part of Torah, zehu hayisoid lebiur haTzemach Tzedek. This is the basis of the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation. She'inyonei shel Pesach Sheni ba'avodas ha'odom. He explains what is the idea of Pesach Sheni in service of man. That shayich letoichen ha'avoda shel chodesh Iyar. It has a connection to the service of the month of Iyar. It has an inherent connection to the month of Iyar. HaChodesh HaSheni, which is the second month. And the Rebbe explains now what the Tzemach Tzedek says. So the fact that we pushed it off a whole month is the basis for the Tzemach Tzedek explaining it, that there is a connection of the Avodah Pesach Sheni with the month of Iyar, the second month. Toichen Biyur at Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe gives now a synopsis of the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation. In Yonai, the Tzemach Tzedek says as follows: In Yonai shel Pesach Sheni ba'avodas ha'odam hu. What is the idea of the second Pesach as it is in the service of man? What's the service of man in Pesach Sheni? Is ha'aliyah me'hadarga harishona, the Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's the elevation from the first level. The first level, b'chodesh harishon, is to go out of Mitzrayim, which is Pesach Rishon shebechodesh Nisan. That's the first Pesach, which is the month of Nisan, HaChodesh Rishon. So the Chodesh Rishon is connected to the first Avodah. On the Sheni, we're going already up to the second step. That's the first step is Chodesh Rishon. We're going up the Darga Hashniya to the second step, Shebechodesh Iyar, which is in the month of Iyar, HaChodesh HaSheni. That's the second month. That's the second Avodah in the month of Iyar. That's Pesach Sheni, the Hainu, which is Ha'avodah deva'asei toiv habo la'achre hagdama sur MeRa. That is the Avodah of do good, asei toiv, and that follows after the introduction of Sur MeRa to stay away from negativity. So basically, the first month, Rishon, Pesach Rishon, the month of Nisan, is this month which we stay away from Ra. In Avodah Sa'odam, and then in Pesach Sheni, the month of Iyar, that's when we climb the ladder. We go on a higher level, we go to Ba'asei Tov. So what it means is follow, Koloimer. Yetzias Mitzrayim hitchilas ha'avodah. Going out of Mitzrayim, that's the beginning of the avodah. Sur MeRa, meaning stay away from bad, which is basically hayitzim Mitzrayim. Just leave, go out of Egypt. Okay, mevuar betanya, and also this is like explained in the Tanya. Shebi Yitzias Mitzrayim nemar kibarach ha'am, that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, it says they ran away. It says that Pari heard that the ran away. What is the idea of running away? So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that the Yidden needed to run because since they hadn't rid themselves from the negativity which they were involved while they were in Egypt, so the way to go is to run from it. So that's basically leaving the evil behind. That's the month of Nisan, Kiboracha. Kivur b'Tanya, as explained in Tanya, Shabbat Mitzrayim Nemar Kiboracha Mipnei. The reason why does it say ran away? Shahara shebenefoshes Yisrael adayin hoyi b'tokvechulu, because the negativity, the evil that was in the souls of the Jewish people was in full force as they were leaving Mitzrayim. So they hadn't yet transformed themselves. They hadn't yet refined themselves. So they were still with the negativity, the evil in their souls. So they had to run away. So their main service at that time was just to stay away from the negativity, leave Mitzrayim. Habricha metumas Mitzrayim, that is running away from the impurity of Egypt. After the introduction of the service of staying away from evil, then they got to the higher level. They were elevated to the level of asay toiv, do good. How do we translate this in Avodas Hashem? We have the level of itkafya, which you force yourself. In other words, the evil is still there, and you have to force yourself to do the right things. And then you come to the level of Ithapcha, you turn things around, that you no longer have to deal with the negativity. That's the second step. And in the spiritual service in the soul of man, Yitzias Mitzrayim Pesach Rishon, exodus of Egypt, which is the first Pesach, he ha'avoida the itkafya. That's the service of itkafya, to subdue, to force yourself, push yourself. Kfiyas harasha benafshi, that is to subdue the evil which is in your soul. Zu, and then from this avoida, from the month of Nisan, Baruch Ha'am, Magia ve'oila l'darga shniya. Then you reach and you elevate to the second step. The ha'avoida the Ithapcha, that's the service of turning things around. Hafichas hara l'toiv, that is to turn around the negativity, the bad, turn it around to good. That is to Ithapcha. So you don't have to fight anymore, but you've turned it around and you don't have any more negativity, which is, like we say in the Shema, b'chol levavcha, with both, b'shnei yetzerecha, with both of your inclinations. Not only the godly soul, but also the animal soul loves Hashem as well. You turned it around. And that's the second step that you get on in the second step of Asay Toiv. Umayla zu the Pesach Sheni. So this advantage of the second Pesach, that it's already turned things around for the good, is b'chol levavcha mas'ima im klolus hachidush shebavedas chodesh iyar. That is fits with the general novelty of the service in the month of Iyar, as compared to the service of the month of Nisan, the first month. Chodesh Hasheni legabe Chodesh Nisan Chodesh Harishon. When the second month, relative in comparison to the month of Nisan, which is the first month, which is we have Sfiras HaOmer. We're counting the Omer, and here we count the Omer. The Iker Sfiras HaOmer, who Kol Chodesh Iyar. The main Sfiras Eimer, yes, we have a little bit in the month of Nisan, we have a little bit in the month of Sivan, but the main Sfiras Eimer is all of the month is Iyar. Iyar is the month of Sfiras Eimer. The Avodah the Sfiras Eimer, what is the service of counting of the Eimer? Birur Hamidus v'Hafichoson L'Kedusha. That is to sort out your emotional, your character traits, and turn them around to Kedusha. That's what we do in the month of Iyar. So this second step of Ithapcha is fitting with the general avodah of the month of Iyar, the Bechol Levavcha, to turn things around in the service of Hashem. This is basically what the Tzemach Tzedek says. And based on this, the Tzemach Tzedek explains the difference between Pesach Rishon or Pesach Sheni, between the first Pesach and the second Pesach, as it is with regards to the Chometz possession during the Pesach. The first Pesach, over there's no, you're not allowed to see, you're not allowed to find. Chometz cannot be in your possession during Pesach Rishon. Vasheni, but the second is Chometz umatzo ima babais. It's still at home. You can have, you're bringing the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Iyar, and yet when you eat the Korban Pesach at nighttime, you can have chametz in the house, and chametz and matzah with the house. So it means there's no prohibitions. Why? What does it have to do with the chametz? Mekivon shahavoida the Pesach Rishon husur meira. Since the avoida of the first Pesach is to stay away from the evil, which is bricha mehara, you're running away from the evil. You can't have chametz over there. Chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, the negativity. That's why there is an obligation to remove, totally destroy the chametz. Haremes al hara. The chametz represents hints to the negativity, to evil, because that's called sa'ir shabi'isa. We call the sourdough in the dough. That's called the negativity that rises, that has the dough rise. That's the sa'ir shabi'isa, and that part you have to get rid of. That's why we can't have chametz. You can't have the sourdough of the dough. There should be no chametz in your possession. Why? Because you have to stay away from negativity. You can't have chametz over there because chametz is going to bring you down. So you have to get rid of it. Pesach Sheni, as opposed to the second Pesach Sheni, Pesach Sheni, what's the idea? Is to turn the bad to the good. That's the Pesach Sheni. So that's why we don't need to. That at the same time, to get rid of the chametz from your possession, you can have the chametz. You can have the chametz with you in the house, because you're already reached a level of refinement, and you've turned the negative to good. So having chametz doesn't bother us. Because through Pesach Sheni it was given with addition hakoyach lahapichas hachametz lekedusha. We can turn around this hapcha. We can turn the chametz to kedusha, the month of Iyar, and therefore the fact that you have chametz isn't a contradiction to the Pesach, because we're already at the level of Ithapcha, and we can turn that chametz around, and therefore you can have chametz in your house. And the Rebbe gives another example for this. So basically, the Rebbe says explains the month of Nisan is the month of itkafya. That's Ithapcha, turnaround, and the Rebbe explains that's why in the first one Pesach, the first Pesach, you can't have chametz because you're still running away from chametz, so you can't transform the chametz into kedusha. But after Sfiras Ha'omer, over there, you have the extra koyach to transform it, and it becomes Ithapcha. So it's okay to have chametz. And the Rebbe gives another example of we know that there is no chametz normally in the korbanos, the mincha, in the Beis HaMikdash. But when it comes at the end of Sfira, the Shtei Alechem, you have chametz over there, because as explained, because at that point, once you were mevarer all of the midos and the negativity, so then you can even have chametz and transform that, and it's not going to bring you down. The Rebbe brings in the bracket, via shloimar, we can say shezehu. This is also that we're saying here that Pesach Sheni, the month of Iyar, you can have chametz in the house. This is similar. Similar to the advantage of the two breads on Shavuos that we're saying. If you measure it next to the Korban Omer of Chag Pesach, they were both matirin to eat from the new, and this is for the people, and this is for the korbanos to bring the milcha from the new wheat. But the difference is the omer was brought matzah, and the shtei alechem was brought chometz. Shemalosi davke bazeh shechometz te'efeno. So what's the Torah says about the shtei alechem? You bake it chometz. You make it chometz. Why? So it's explained because now we can turn around the chametz itself. Because after we conclude the service of counting the omer, so the chametz is totally turned around to kedusha. And you're able to, and you make it into a korban for Hashem. So this is the explanation according to the Tzemach Tzedek. Why did we wait for a whole month to give the korban? Because the idea is this is avodah of Ithapcha, the avodah of Iyar, and the month of Nisan is not the month to get to that second step. And the second step, first comes itkafya, subdue, and then becomes you turn around the Bechalavavcha, Bishnei Yitzerecha. For that, we're waiting for the month of Iyar. So that explains why we don't have Pesach Sheni right following the first day of Pesach, even though the people that wanted the Pesach Sheni would have already been ready to bring the korban. They could have technically bring, but the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, what the avodah of Pesach Sheni, it belongs to the month of Iyar, which is the month of Sfiras Ha'omer, which is the month of Ithapcha, and therefore that's when we bring the Pesach Sheni. Oizbeis, the Rebbe is going to question this whole idea that this is a second step. If it is a second step, what about somebody who did bring the korban? As the Rebbe will continue to speak in Oizbeis. Oizbeis. We need to look into the explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek. This explanation, the second Pesach is a second step, and it's an advantage in the service. Asay Toiv is Hapcha. We're saying this is a level of Asay Toiv versus Sur MeRa. This is us doing good, turning around. Habo, we say this comes la'achrei hagdoma ha'avodah the Pesach Rishon. That comes after the introduction of the avodah of the first Pesach, which is Sur MeRa itkafya. So this is a process. First, we need Sur MeRa, we need Pesach Sheni, and then we go to the itkafya. But hu heipach hamefurish b'pshuta shel mikra v'halocha. This seems to be just the opposite. It goes totally against the simple explanation of the pasuk. This explanation, Tzemach Tzedek, goes against the explanation of the pasuk and the halacha, because in halacha, the second Pesach isn't a step higher. The second Pesach is making up for something missed in the first Pesach. Shakol in Yonash Pesach Sheni, all of the Pesach Sheni, Einei Elo Beish Sheloi Hevi Pesach Rishon. It's only if you didn't bring the Pesach Rishon. It's not a second step, first step and then a second step of Pesach Sheni. The Pesach Sheni is one who did not bring the first Pesach needs to bring the Pesach Sheni. Umishikriv Korban be Pesach Rishon, one who did bring his Korban Pesach Rishon. Not only does not he not have an obligation to bring a Pesach Sheni, it's prohibited to him to offer a second Pesach. However, so here in Pshuta Shel Mikra Halacha, you only if you miss the first one, you bring the second one. And according to the Tzemach Tzedek, it's just the opposite. In addition to the fact that after you do the avodah of Pesach Rishon itkafya, it applies and also is demanded. Avodah the Pesach Sheni, you still have to do Pesach Sheni. So not only that we have that Pesach Sheni after Pesach Rishon, unlike the Pshuta Shel Mikra, you only have Pesach Sheni if you miss Pesach Rishon. But on top of that, the Pesach Sheni ki'im davke of the Agdomas Avodah the Pesach Rishon. So according to Tzemach Tzedek, you cannot come to Pesach Sheni unless and specifically by first doing the Avodah Pesach Rishon. And here we're saying, in Pshat, you can only bring Pesach Sheni if you did not bring Pesach Rishon. According to the Tzemach Tzedek, Pesach Sheni comes after Pesach Rishon, and it fills in, and you can't get to the second level, you don't have the first level. So which one is it? Is it according to the Pnimis Yonim, the way the Tzemach Tzedek seems to go against the Pashta Pshat? In the Pashta Pshat, you bring Pesach Sheni if you didn't do Pesach Rishon. According to the Tzemach Tzedek, Pesach Sheni is brought after, on top of Pesach Rishon. And not only that you're able to bring it, but you can't get to Pesach Sheni if you didn't bring Pesach Rishon. So how is he going to get the Pesach Sheni? And according to the Pasuk, you only bring Pesach Sheni if you didn't do Pesach Rishon. So how do we reconcile that? And the Rebbe is going to explain this in starting with his Gimel, but the point over here is, what the Rebbe is saying is that there's other parts besides the Avodah Pesach Sheni is not only as far as the Korban. The person, we're talking about the Avodah Pesach Sheni, which encompasses a lot more, as we'll see as the Rebbe starts to explain, starting in Ois Gimel. Ois Gimel. So the Rebbe says, "V'yeshleimer habiu b'zeh," so we can say the explanation. Ubahagdim, and by first introducing that ha'amur li'il, this that we said before, shakol ha'inyan de Pesach Sheni. The Rebbe brought this down. What is Pesach Sheni? Hu davke kishaloi kodam loi Pesach Rishon, is only if there wasn't a Pesach Rishon. But that's only as far as korbanos go. You can only bring a korban Pesach Sheni if you didn't bring a Pesach Rishon. So it means that Pesach Sheni is a makeup, not an addition to Pesach Rishon, but it's a makeup if you missed out. That's only as far as the korban goes. If you did not bring in the first Pesach, you bring in the second one. But and if you did bring in the Rishon, it is prohibited to bring b'sheni. That's only as far as a korban goes. That means that as far as a korban, the Pesach Sheni is not a follow-up to the Pesach Rishon, but it's only if you did not bring the Pesach Rishon, then you can bring the Pesach Sheni. I will move on, but it's understood. This does not apply to the other aspect and the other mitzvahs of Pesach. As for example, Isurei chometz v'achilas matzah, the prohibition on Pesach not to eat chometz. Whether you can bring a korban pesach or not, there's still a prohibition against possessing chametz, eating chametz, the eating of the matzah. You're still mechuyev. Shegam b'shein makriv korban pesach b'yudalad b'nisan al pitoira. Even if halachically you're not able to, or you're not doing the korban because the Torah tells you liyosu tame, because you are tame v'derech rechaika and you don't bring it, but still mechuyev b'surei chametz v'lechol matzah. You're still obligated on the prohibition of chametz and eating matzah. That means no matter whether you bring a korban rishon or not, you're still doing the avodah of Pesach Rishon in other areas besides the korban. And the Rebbe says, not only that, not only do you have to do all the other areas, but even the fact that they didn't do the Korban Pesach was also not something arbitrary, that they were Tomei because they chose to be Tomei, or B'derech Rechoika, that's why they came to complain. Adrabah, the Rebbe explains the reason why they were complaining is because Moshe instructed them to go ahead and carry out their nephews, those Nodav Avihu that died, and they were commanded to do so. So they were Tomei. That's why they were complaining, because otherwise, why are they complaining? They're Tomei. What Loma Negora? Loma Negora is because we didn't do it on our own. We did it because Moshe Rabbeinu told us. So that means that they were not negligent in anything. They were mechuyev like anybody else in all the obligations. They couldn't bring a korban because they were told to become tamei. And the Rebbe says like that, yesh lahisif. So we can add b'chlal, whether you bring a korban pesach or not, you're still mechuyev in all mitzvahs. But also, even the korban pesach that they did not bring wasn't out of negligence or anything. In the case of the pasuk, who were the people that would tamei nefesh odom? Kedivrei Chazal, as our sages tell us, the Gemara says in Gemara Sukkah, they were Mishoel ve'el Tzofen. Shahoyu oiskim benodov v'aviu. This was Mishoel and Tzofen, who were occupied in taking care of the bodies of Nodav Avihu when they died, and they became Tomei because Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Su asachechem, he told them to remove them, to move them. They were instructed Moshe Rabbeinu, Kuloimar, Shetumosam hoisa pitzivui Moshe. That was by Moshe's instruction. Pasuk says, Kirvu su'u achechem. So, therefore, this means that they actually had all the inyonim of Pesach Rishon. The korban they couldn't bring, but it's not like they couldn't bring because Moshe Rabbeinu told them, which also explains to us the meaning of the pasuk. They say we can't bring the korban because we're tamei, so that's not a complaint. That's an answer. The answer is the complaint was we're not tamei on our own. Moshe Rabbeinu told us to get tamei. The Ashleimer Shezeu Biur Tanos, we can say this explains their argument. They're saying Loma Nigora. Why should we lose out? L'chayrein movement. It's not understood. Ma mokem l'tayne Loma Nigora l'bilti hakri ves korban Hashem b'moedei. What room is there for such an argument? They're saying, why should we lose out not to bring the Korban Hashem in a timely way? Didn't they themselves give us the answer to this argument? They said, we are Tomei l'nefesh odom shalochein, and that's why, because they're Tomei, they can't bring the Korban Hashem b'moedei. So why are they saying we are Tomei l'nefesh odom loma nigora? You can't bring. You're giving the answer. The reason you can't bring it is because you're Tomei. That's the answer. But now we understand. The Rebbe says they became Tomei not on their own. They became Tomei because Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Ki yisua sachechem. Elisatanosum hoisom miyusedes. Their argument was based on that this was by Moshe's instruction. And that's what they argued. How is it possible? Through Moshe's command, Nigora, we should lose out. Ubefrat, from bringing a korban of Hashem in a timely manner. So this tells us that they did everything right. And even the fact they couldn't do the Pesach was a specific instruction of Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore it's very clear and obvious that all Pesach matters by these people, Levada Krovas Pesach, without being able to actually bring the Pesach, it was complete. So we can't say that they were lacking. They weren't lacking it. They had everything. They had all the mitzvahs and everything. And even this was just, they couldn't practically bring it because they were tummy, but also not out of their own tumah on their own. It was Moshe Rabbeinu telling them. So therefore, this Pesach Sheni that we're saying, first get rid of the Ra, then comes Pesach Sheni to Ithapcha, Asay Toiv, that it fits very good, besides the Korban Pesach. Avodah Ruchnis the Chag Pesach, Sur MeRa. This that we're discussing, the Avodah Ruchnis of Pesach, which is staying away MeRa. Kfiya Sarah, which is to force, subdue the Ra. Kshura B'kiyum Shar Inyonehu Mitzvah Chag. That's tied to the other matters and the mitzvahs of the holiday of Pesach. Isurei chometz, the prohibition of chometz, chiv achilas matzah, the obligation to eat matzah, lachem oini, a poor man's bread, which oini, poor man's, is also the level of itkafya. You haven't yet mastered, hadn't yet become rich. They're still struggling. Oini. So, therefore, since even one who does not bring the Pesach Rishon in a timely way, he's still going to service in the rest of the matters of Pesach. He's going to be doing his service. So he services Pesach Rishon, then the Pesach Sheni. Nimtza Pesach Sheni hu etzli adarge shniya. Turns out the Pesach Sheni by him is the second step, because he did the first step, not the Korban, but he did the first step, even if he didn't bring the Korban. In the other matters, in Chamatzah, Isur Chometz, Lachem Oini. So it turns out that Pesach is the second step. Habo la'achrei ha'avodah d'chag Pesach Harishon. That comes after the avodah of the Pesach, the first one. Okay, birat samach tzedek. So the birat fits. The Korban is one separate matter, but everything else fits. That you do the avodah of itkafya, and then you come to Pesach Sheni is Ithapcha birat samach tzedek, as the Tzemach Tzedek explained. So the Pesach Sheni magia ve'oilel madrega hashniya ba'avodah, that on Pesach Sheni you go up, and you reach to the second avodah asay toiv. In Asay Toiv, and that's the level of Ithapcha to turn things around. So the fact that you bring up Pesach Sheni for not bringing Korban Rishon does not negate that in everything else it's Sheni, because the avodah of the Pesach Rishon is all the other mitzvahs. Even if you didn't bring a Korban Pesach, you're still going to be mechuyev in all the other mitzvahs. That's the avodah of Sur MeRa, and then you come to the Pesach Sheni, to the higher avodah. Okay. So we don't have a problem anymore from the Tzemach Tzedek's beer with the Pshutei Shel Mikra. Oizdalad. So now, Adayin Loi Nizbaer Ha'inyan Kol Tzorkoi. But it's not fully explained. We still don't understand it completely. If Pesach Sheni is a higher level, So why is it that somebody who brought the Pesach Rishon is not allowed to reach the second level? And how does one reach the second level? Let's see inside. This is not yet fully explained. Let it be true that even one who had not offered the korban of the first Pesach, he had not really lost out from this service. He didn't bring the Pesach. Gamma Ruchnis, in the spiritually, he didn't bring the Pesach edition, but he didn't lose his level, spiritual level. But Darga Rishon, the Chaga Pesach edition, he still was the first level of Pesach. Mekivan Shoyu Etzle Kolinyoni Pesach edition. Levat Korban Pesach. He had all matters of the first Pesach besides Korban Pesach. Umimeno Oilel Darga Shnei, and then from that, all the levels that he did have, all the Pesach Rishon experience that he had, he goes up to the second level, the Pesach Sheni. However, but on the other hand, Aleph, why is it prohibited from one who brought the first Pesach? Why is it prohibited to bring the second Pesach? According to the Tzemach Tzedek explanation, he needs the avodah Pesach Sheni. Why don't we allow him to bring the Korban Pesach? Why is the Korban Pesach not brought for the second one if he did? Somebody who couldn't bring it has the avodah. But if he did bring it, why can't he have also the avodah Pesach Sheni? Base, and number two, we want to know, Ubame oilahu the darga shniya. How with what does he go up to the second step? B'avodas Hashem k'shabo, when it comes rak ba'akrovas haPesach Rishon b'meyadei, that you only when you bring the first Pesach, you don't bring a second Pesach, and yet Pesach Sheni, you're going to the higher level, but you're not bringing. Why can't you bring a Pesach Sheni? And how do you go up on the second level without bringing the Pesach Sheni? So that still needs to be explained, since the Pesach, we understand the one who didn't bring the Korban still has all the advantages of Pesach Rishon as well. But why is the one who did bring the Korban? Why can't he go up through another Korban? Or how would the other person get up? Only he brought the first Pesach and not doesn't bring a second Korban. So the Rebbe said we can say the explanation that after you bring the first Pesach, shuv ein tzorech lahavi korban Pesach Sheni kedei lahagi lamadrega shnei. You don't. It's not necessary to bring a korban on the second Pesach in order to get to the second level. If you brought on the first level the korban, that is sufficient. Asay toiv Ithapcha. To reach Asay Tov Ithapcha on Pesach Sheni, you don't need a korban if you brought it in the first one. Kizeh kvar nase b'shleimus al yidei korban Pesach Rishon. That has already been done in its most complete form by bringing the first Pesach. So you don't need another korban Pesach Sheni. Kloimer. This that a person has the ability to reach in the month of Iyar, Chodesh Hasheni, and the second month, Lemadrega Hashniya, B'avodas Hashem, to that second step in Avodas Hashem, Asay Toiv, level of Ithapcha, Bo Alidei Korban Pesach Sheb Pesach Rishon. This comes through the Korban Pesach, which is in the first Pesach. Habo Hazborosei, Rebbe explains now. Korban hu Meloshen Kiruv. Korban comes from the language closeness. So idei korbanis miskarev adam laHashem, through the korbanis a person gets close to Hashem. As in many places explain what is the idea of a korban in the service of a person. The person needs to offer to Hashem the animal that's within the person. To such, you bring it to Hashem so it's fit to be brought, offered on the Mizbeach of Hashem, and to be burnt by the fire that comes from above, so that he should be included in Kedusha. So that's what a korban is. Vakrovas Pesach Rishon, he hanesenes koyach. That offering, the Pesach Rishon, that is what gives the power, upoelis, and it impacts shehemshech avodas ha'odam, that the continuation of the service of the person, Sfirasayim, the counting of the Omer, Shezman Maschil Tekev Mimachras HaPesach, which time begins immediately after Pesach, after Yom Tov, the day after Yom Tov. It should be in such a way that through it he will reach the level of Asei Toivis Hapcha. That comes from the first Korban. And this does not conflict, does not contradict the explanation of Tzemach Tzedek. Pesach Sheni in Yonei Hadarga Hashniya B'Avodas Hashem. It's the second step. Here we're saying that even the first avodah of the korban allows for you to be accomplishing later on, and that's already the first step. So how come the Tzemach Tzedek says that's the second step? Here we're saying it's the first step. It's not a contradiction. Ben Birat Tzemach Tzedek. Pesach Sheni Yonei Hadarga Shniya B'Avodas Hashem. V'Yonei Shel Pesach Sheni, and then we're saying, on the other hand, Shabol L'Sakenu L'Hashlim L'Sachsorin, the Pesach Rishon, that Pesach Sheni is coming to make up the lacking of the first Pesach. So the contradiction would be, but still, Tzemach Tzedek said this is second, that's first, but according to the Pashto Pshat, that it's making up for the lack, that you didn't bring the Pesach Rishon. Because it's Korban, or the other aspect, Ki Avedose Shel Pesach Sheni Darga Shni is Hapcha. When we talk about Pesach Sheni in the explanation of the Tzemach Tzedek, which is the level of Ithapcha, the second level, Tolui Behakrovas Korban Pesach. That hinges in bringing of the Korban Pesach. You need to bring a Korban Pesach in order to bring about the level of Ithapcha. Either one. If you brought the first Pesach, so for sure, if you brought it in the first one, then you will reach already from the Pesach Rishon, you will reach to the second level when it comes b'chodesh hasheni. Koilel Yom Pesach Sheni, not only the month, all the year, but part of it also includes the Pesach Sheni, Yudalid year. You don't need to, there's no place therefore, the Korban Noisav, because the Korban accomplishes what needs to be accomplished. As opposed to one who did not bring the first Korban on the first month. He cannot reach the level of Ithapcha without fixing and making up what is lacking the Pesach Rishon. Pesach Rishon makes the change, but if you didn't do it, you have to make it up. You missed to bring a Korban Pesach Sheni. Korban, you have to get close to Hashem in order for the Ithapcha to take place. If you brought it the first time, you don't bring a second one. There's no need for it. But if you didn't bring it, you have to make up because there's no Korban, there's no Kiruv Lashem. That comes through the Korban. You have to do it in Pesach Sheni. Below Yigora lahakriv, and he won't be lacking, and he'll bring al derech Pesach Rishon, just like the first Pesach would give you the ability to Ithapcha, so that the Sheni, now bringing it to the Sheni makes, so it turns out that it makes up for missing the first time, but also the first time that you bring the Korban, the first Pesach, it what it allows for the second Pesach to take place. I say, the Rebbe now says, Al Pibir Zeh Yumtak Gam Ken Hatam. So based on this explanation will also be sweetened the reasoning. Shegam Bizman Hazeh Nikva Pesach Sheni Leyoim Meyuchad L'Chol Yisrael. That in our days, Pesach Sheni is set for a special day for all Yidden. All Yidden have Pesach Sheni. Why Pesach Sheni today? Vashkos Rabbeinu Azokan B'Sidur, the Alter Rebbe recites in the Siddur, writes in the Siddur, Shebe Pesach Sheni Neimrim Tachna. Pesach Sheni don't say Tachna. There's a minhag, a custom to eat matzah to remember Pesach Sheni. The l'chayre ha'inyan shel Pesach Hasheni hu tikun v'hashlama li mishel leikle Pesach Rishon. It would seem that what is Pesach Sheni? If you, it's to make up a correction and a makeup for one who didn't bring Pesach Rishon. So. And the Rebbe brings us further, because even according to the opinion of Gam, in the bracket, Lamandomar v'cheinu halacha, also according to the opinion, which also the halacha is like that, the Pesach Sheni regel b'fnei atzmei, the Pesach Sheni is its own holiday. Shalochein gam mishel echal olav achiv lahavi Pesach Rishon. Even one who has not rested upon him the obligation to bring the first Pesach, and he becomes obligated in between the first and the second Pesach. So he had no obligation. Does he have to bring a Pesach Sheni? Kotnishin is gadol, a minor who became an adult in between the two Pesach. Or Geshin is Gair ben Rishon l'Sheni, or a convert who converted in between, has to bring another Korban. So we see it's lav davke connected to the first, because he wasn't even obligated to the first one, and still he has to bring Chayiv Lavi Pesach Sheni. But Mikol Mokaim Al Korchach Tzorich Loimar, we have to still say Mefurish B'Kro Shabo Al Yidei Atayna Loma Nigora, that the pasuk says it comes. Why should we lose out? So it has to do still with the idea of losing out, which means Shenyone Shal Pesach Sheni that it's a makeup for something we're missing for the first one. Notwithstanding, the halacha is that you'll still bring the Pesach Sheni, but in concept, it's a makeup for the Rishon. So, and one who did the first one, it's impossible to be obligated in the second Pesach. So, why do we? A cotton, why does he bring a Korban Pesach Sheni? The Torah also added and came up with the novelty that it's also its own holiday, so you can bring just by then, provided that you didn't bring the first one. Although the minor wasn't obligated in the first one, because and still nitnu lo have shoris lahakriv Pesach v'yidalet be'ir, to bring it on Yidal be'ir. So that was an additional. So, but basically, the second one is a makeup for the first one. So nowadays, we didn't miss the first one. Why do we have Pesach Sheni? Lochein. Bizman hazeh, nowadays, especially Chutzlaritz, we don't have no Korban Pesach. The Pesach Sheni, it doesn't seem to fit the whole idea of the second Pesach. So what kind of a celebration is Pesach Sheni in any sort of matter? So well, there's no Pesach Sheni, there's no Chiv Korban. So why is there even a Pesach Sheni? And besides the fact, you say to Mezul, Ish nitchel lePesach Sheni, vein tzibur nitchel lePesach Sheni. Only one person can be pushed off if he's Tomei, so you bring the Pesach Sheni. But if the whole community, then you don't push it on Pesach Sheni. Kuleimer. Inyan hatashlumim the Pesach Sheni nitna rak liyochid le'tzibur. This whole idea in the makeup for Pesach Sheni was only for an individual, not for a community. A community doesn't go to Pesach Sheni. So why do we have Pesach Sheni nowadays? Vim came Ketzad Masim, Likvoya Pesach Sheni b'yoyim kayoyim the minhogim yichodim. How could we have special minhogim shenemim tachnon v'chulu? We don't say tachnon, etc. Avol kol bnei Yisrael yachad, about for all Yidden. What does this mean? It doesn't seem to fit to have today a Pesach Sheni. So what the Rebbe is wondering, and the Rebbe is questioning, what the Rebbe is wondering, and the Rebbe is questioning over here, why do we have Pesach Sheni today? We don't have any korbanos. And either way, even if you're going to say that Pesach Sheni is a regel b'fnei atzmei, a ger, a cotton, would have to bring Pesach Sheni, even if they weren't mechuyev in the Pesach Rishon. But you can't get away from the fact that the pastors in the pasuk, the Pesach Sheni, is a tashlumim for the ones who said lo manigora. Why should we lose out? And if you bring in the first, we don't bring the second one. So it means that in addition to lo manigora, there's also by itself also. So if there was no chiyuv on the Rishon, the cotton or the ger would have to still make the sheni. So why are we doing today bisman hazeh? Why don't we say tachnon? Besides the fact that Rebbe also brings down the halacha is that a tzibur is not nitche to Pesach Sheni. And the Rebbe now suggests that maybe the Rebbe says we're going to say there's a special halacha that if the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built in between, there's an opinion that's brought down in the Yerushalmi and maybe also the Babli that if the Beis Hamikdash will be built between the Pesach Rishon and the Pesach Sheni, will be mechuyev in a Pesach Sheni. So, but the Rebbe says the Korban Pesach, the minhagim Pesach Sheni today is not zecher for that we might be mechuyev. We're doing it as zecher to the Korban of the Pesach Sheni was the time Beis Hamikdash. So why are we doing that when there is no chiyuv today and there's no Pesach Sheni? The Rebbe will prove from this his point that he was bringing out from the Tzemach Tzedek that Pesach Sheni has some special powers to reach to the higher level in Avodas Hashem. Let's look inside. The Rebbe says in the brackets, "V'doiche godol leimar is taritz." It's very difficult to answer. Shezeu raka pidas Rabbi Yehuda b'Yerushalmi. That this goes only according to the view of Rabbi Yehuda in Yerushalmi. He says over there, "The kshenit and liYisrael livnes beis ha'bechira ben Pesach Rishon leBeis Sheni," when the Yidden will be given the opportunity to build the Beis HaBechira, the chosen house, the Beis HaMikdash. In between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, Oisim Hatzibur Pesach Sheni, then the whole community make a Pesach Sheni. So it turns out that will be a Tzibur that it's nitche to the Pesach Sheni because there was no Beis HaMikdash in the Pesach Rishon. So the Rebbe says, even though we say before that a tzibur is not nitche, is not pushed off to Pesach Sheni, but if there was no Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash was built in between, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is that we will make a Pesach Sheni. The tzibur will make a Pesach, Oisinat tzibur Pesach Sheni. And the Rebbe says further that even the Babli can hold like the Yerushalmi, Befrat Api Mashin Isbor B'Mokam Achar, based on what's explained elsewhere. Sheyesh Leimer, that we can say, Shagam Habavli Svirle Bazeka Yerushalmi. That also the Bavli holds in this like the Yerushalmi. The Be'ofen Kozeh HaTzibur Oiseh Pesach Sheni. In such a scenario, the Tzibur will make a Pesach Sheni. So Vim Kain, Av Shein Korban Pesach B'Rishon, even there is no Korban Pesach B'Rishon, Mikol Makom Efsher Sheyeh Korban Pesach Sheni. It is possible to be a Korban Pesach Sheni, even though at Tzibur, when there was no Beis Hamikdash. So the idea that we're saying that Tzibur cannot do Pesach Sheni, we do find. But the Rebbe says that's not why we're celebrating Pesach Sheni today, that we're not saying Tachnun and we're eating matzah, the minhogim. We're doing it not because Mashiach might come and will be Chaim in Pesach Sheni. We're doing it to commemorate Pesach Sheni in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Kemash on Nuchaygigim. Pesach Sheni, that we celebrate Pesach Sheni, Eine Shaykh Le'efshorus, Dakrovas Pesach Sheni. That's not connected to the possibility of bringing a Pesach Sheni. Kim Zeichen lePesach Sheni Shoy Bizman HaMikdash. We're doing it because we're remembering the Pesach Sheni that was in time of the Mikdash. So, Ma Mokim Likvoya Zeichen Litzibur. So, what room is there? What kind of a idea is this to make a Zeichen for the Tzibur? Al Tashlumim Di'inya Shlenitnel Yochid. A makeup which was only given for an individual, and here the whole community is celebrating Pesach Sheni. It's not even something which is connected to the Tzibur. So, why are we doing Pesach Sheni? But now we have an explanation. So we have to say, therefore, that Pesach Sheni has something, a matter which is shaykh to all Yidden, not only for one who didn't bring Pesach Rishon, but it has something in Pesach Sheni in itself. And based upon what we explained earlier in the context, the content, what is the idea of Pesach Sheni in the service of man? The Ithapcha, the complete avodah, the birur, the asay tov. Moving on even pashtus. So now we understand it simply. Because this day, it's within the power of every Jewish person. We have the ability to reach that second higher level of Avodas Hashem. Avodah the Ithapcha, the avodah to turn things around. Kolaymer, that is to say, Gam elu shehikrivu Pesach Rishon, even those who already did the Pesach Rishon, Shleimus Peulas Hakrova Zu, the completeness, the wholesomeness of this, of the act of that bringing the Korban, she avoided this habcho bo b'chedesh hasheni. That comes in the second month. Yes, it was accomplished through the Korban in the first month, but the Shleimus comes in the second month. That comes in Pesach Sheni. B'frad Pesach Sheni, the second month year, generally Sheni, and especially on Yudalid year in Pesach Sheni. Shaboy maschila hasvira hashayeches lemidas hahoid. Then you start with the svira. All the weeks starts the week of Hoid, which is the fourth week of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, the fifth week, and starts with Yudalit. And therefore, Gam Bizman Hazeh, Sheyeshna Avodah Ruchnis, even now that we have the spiritual service, Shebekor Pesach, we celebrate this special time because we're going up to the second step. Shabavidas Hashem is to turn around and do good. So therefore, the idea, the Pnimis Inyonim exists, and that's why we celebrate it. This is Mesichas Pesach Sheni, Tovshin Mem Zayin, and Tovshin Daled Mem.